Hi, welcome everyone. Today we have a very, very special episode and a very, very special guest. I'm really delighted to have Jamoul Celey on the line. He's from Carbonado Coaching and is one of the first, if not the first, voices in corporate trauma. So Patricia and I, being fairly new, exploring this term and how to heal and help companies heal, we were really excited to get Jamoul on the line to talk about corporate trauma. So I'll open it up with a question, Jamoul, and please just feel free to elaborate and tell us about our journey. But what I would love to hear is how you first got into corporate trauma.
Well, good morning. And Patricia and Lauren, thank you, Laura, for inviting me to have this conversation. I'm really excited to have it. And how I got into corporate trauma, I am a professional that works in leadership training and professional development. And my primary base of clients are students in higher education and pre-professionals. And years of doing that work and helping young people jump into their field of endeavor, I would stay in contact with a number of them and reconciling their experiences and keeping an eye on their experiences early in their career. I realized that I had not prepared them for a lot of the things that I fully was aware that they would venture into experiencing. And I kind of put it, it's like walking into the buzzsaw and falling into the meat grinder, right? You know, you're going from school and going to class to, you know, being around a group of people whose livelihood is at stake, right? And personalities come into play and their experiences that go along with it. And so when I started to really understand, you know, how a lot of my clients and the young people that I was working with were not prepared. They were conditioned, they were trained, they weren't really educated in the way where this young generation is really wired to go, around being fulfilled, around being self-actualized, around being appreciated and valued for who they are as individuals. And the work that they do, and then coming out of the employee mindset and really understanding what value is a direct affront to the old paradigm. And there's things that happen because of that. And so when I started to reconcile that, and gleaning off of their stories and the things that I've gone through, within the corporate industrial complex, I came up with the concept of corporate trauma because it really described what we were going through.
I mean, this is incredibly interesting. And you mentioned like the old paradigm and touched on it before, but what is your definition of corporate trauma? Kind of what are the experiences that it extends into as well? And can you share a little bit about that paradigm?
Absolutely. Corporate trauma, I have a technical definition. And it's really the physiological, psychological, emotional, financial damage or disruption related to negative experiences in the workplace, which are associated with the hierarchy, competition, or capitalism environment that speaks to the professional directly and promotes a specific pattern of behavior that I've identified, right, on a continuum. And that continuum starts with fear, and it's 6 symptoms on that continuum: fear, stress, anxiety, anger, frustration, cognitive dissonance, depression, and then cognitive dissonance. So you start with the inability, because of the way that we are educated or conditioned, to not advocate for simple things that we would do in our personal lives. Like, please pronounce my name correctly, right? Or please observe the fact that, you know, I don't eat lunch because I may be suffering from a chronic medical condition that exercise and a bit of sunlight may be more suitable than actually going somewhere and sitting down with the group. And these microaggressions and these daily things that could cause ridicule can either be a situation of death by 1,000 paper cuts, or you could get a sustained incident like a sack of bricks being dropped on you that will promote this pattern of behavior that's informed by your fear and induced by trauma, all the way through cognitive dissonance, where you have now decided, in order to survive, I have to be one way at work and then one way authentically outside of work. And these two entities are in direct competition or conflict with each other, and it just exhausts you. And then at the end of the day, at the end of the year, at the end of 20 years, you are totally wiped out, and you're looking back, and all the thoughts of greatness and ambition and things that you wanted to accomplish have been removed for just trying to survive, and how exhausting it is to do those things. So it's not one thing, right? People say, well, corporate trauma sounds like burnout or being stressed out. Well, it's that, and then some. It's a multi-lane highway with a bunch of stops on it, right? But it's a continuum. It's all of those things. But when the professional decides that, hey, I'm going to leave because this is just too much, and I'm going to go try something else, or I'm going to step up and lead this bad situation to a positive change, that reconciliation, that thought pattern is where the professional usually recognizes that something's wrong. And that's what I call that reconciliation. That moment of clarity is where corporate trauma usually is first identified. So I hope that made sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And the symptoms I really resonate with, unfortunately. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And thank you for describing that. It's great to have a bit of a framework around it for people to sort of help understand what it is and what it isn't, and how broad it can be too.
Right.
I think, well, I'm speaking for Patricia and I when I say that those experiences resonated with us. But then we also have quite a narrow experience of the workplace, being women in the workplace, but white women in the workplace. And I wonder how the experience of corporate trauma varies or maybe intensifies with ethnic and racial minorities.
Absolutely. I tell everyone all the time, based on who I am and how I grew up, I have an unconscious bias to look into any situation that I find myself and try to find where people like me are, right? What is the history of my demographic in particular, being a Black male, especially going to college, going into the workplace, going into corporate. That unconscious bias in the back of my head is, I want to know the history. I want to know the experiences that inform the individuals that look, feel, sound, and present like I do. And what I've realized just by that unconscious bias and just that thought process of, where are the people that look like me, I've realized in developing corporate trauma that it is the underserved, it is the marginalized, it is the underrepresented demographics that are most vulnerable and suffer from corporate trauma the most, because the margin for error is slimmer, because quantitatively our numbers are usually lower. And I make light of it, but where I'm from, at the top of every list of things that are bad, the statistics are heavy with Black males. And at the bottom of every list of things that are productive and good, statistically, based on experience and overall, that Black males at the bottom of that list. So when I think about, all right, do I have the opportunity to fail when I get this position, or I land this account, or I'm given an opportunity to lead this team? And my margin for error is way low. So my ability to face the fear of not putting up with something that I should not put up with at work because of ignorance, because of just being, people being misinformed, or in some cases, I've just experienced outright racism. I may not do what I would do normally, because I don't want to jeopardize my livelihood. And that induces the stress, the anxiety, and then the continuum starts. So now, at home, I'm presenting through cognitive dissonance as, and sometimes overcompensating for what I can't grab a hold of as far as power to create and to lead and to be successful and to chart my own course at work. So it impacts me personally, right? And then if I get married, like I'm married, I have children, and those issues are now exacerbated with family dynamics. Mm-hmm. Or just driving to the gas station and getting cut off, what is my reaction, right? And a lot of that stuff stems from being in a environment professionally where I can't really be myself, and I'm trying to find ways to cope with it. And there's a gender pay gap here in America where women and our female counterparts make 80 cents to the dollar. So they would have to work each calendar year over to the next calendar year into March, mm-hmm. in order to make what their male counterparts make January to January. So does that creates a slim margin of error. These stereotypical tropes now start to play into, but it's really people trying to deal with the environment that they are forced to work within. So yes, racial, underserved, underrepresented demographics and groups are the most vulnerable and likely to experience what I call and define and author as corporate trauma.
Yeah, thanks for that. I'll just comment on that, Patricia, and hand it over to you. I don't want to hog the mic here, but I really relate to that. It's almost, there's a mental and emotional and sometimes even physical load that is higher if you are underserved, underrepresented in the workplace. And this is speaking from a woman in engineering and construction. And, you have to deal with the stresses of the workplace and the microaggressions and, people maybe not pronouncing your name right and maybe feeling unsafe in certain situations. And I can see that would just inch you closer towards or further along your symptoms and your continuum.
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing, this topic, and I think it is provocative, and it cuts across a lot of the conversations that we're currently having, and also that we haven't had before. As in, when do we get to discuss the psychology of the workplace, and when do we call out some of the real issues that all of us can experience in the workplace, because as Jamoul mentioned before, this is something that we don't necessarily get to do, always have that space to reflect or speak up.
That is correct. Yeah.
I was going to ask, so how do you work with organizations, and how can they get in touch with you?
So I work with organizations in a number of ways. I'm an entrepreneur, and in a lot of ways I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm a regular guy, I have a day job, right? And so I work with a lot of organizations, either directly with them through programming, and coming in and innovating, designing, creating content that will address the things that I feel like I may be a subject matter expert in, specifically dealing with demographics or types of professionals, that fall under my purview and my work experience. So if it's a workshop, if it's keynote address, if it's a panel discussion, or if it's a project that, we are attacking a certain demographics representation or retention, I work that way. And then, the thing that really I get a lot of fulfillment out of is working with the professionals, directly, and having their undivided attention, and going in and doing trainings and performing workshops and whatnot. And then I also take on individual clients, and I have a very specific training around corporate trauma that I put people through that describes the symptoms, and then there's solutions, and then there's a specific leadership personality and profile that has principles that are associated with it that I walk people through, as a kind of, a continuum out of the corporate trauma. Because what I don't want to do, and what I found very effective working with organizations, is to take them or their professionals, even if it's just one-on-one, down through the corporate trauma experience, make it safe enough for them to embrace it, and then bring them out of it, to empower them in order to make them the professional that would alleviate the type of, counter effects that corporate trauma brings along with it. So anybody can get in contact with me. My website is underway. It's Carbonado Coaching .com, which is my personal business. And then my other professional exploits can all be looked at, and I can be reached out to via LinkedIn, my LinkedIn page, which is under my name, Jamoul Celey. And then I can leave my contact information with you, personal email addresses for anybody that may reach out to you that may want to talk to me directly.
Yeah, we'll absolutely do that, Jamoul. Thank you so much. Yeah, we covered a lot today, and we also, there's so much that we didn't cover. I hope this is the first conversation of many. It's corporate trauma is something that's provocative, but it's also pervasive. And we need to talk about it more. And I would say maybe we just close with, do you have, one recommendation or one thing that people can go and do after watching this video to further the progress in preventing and healing from corporate trauma?
Yes, you can heal from corporate trauma if you don't identify it, know what it is, and acknowledge it, right? It has to be pointed out. And corporate trauma isn't some ethereal concept. It is experiences you as a person have with other people. We have to put humanity back into being professionals, and stop thinking that there are two different things, and you leave yourself at the door when you walk into work. And I'm speaking figuratively because a lot of people are working from home. So it has to be pointed out. It has to be acknowledged. And that's where you start along the process and the steps to healing. And so what I'm doing, and I feel like this is a part of my network. You, Laura and Patricia, are part of my network now to put this content in front and center in front of people and professionals from their perspective. We have a podcast that we're starting this evening that can be viewed via live stream on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. So it'll be a safe, fun conversation that I have with a partner of mine here in the States. And that is just the start. That is just start with embracing your humanity. Be done a lot better. And understand that if it doesn't feel right, it's probably something not right.
Absolutely.
I hope I answered your question.
Thank you so much, Jamoul. It's been so interesting to speak with you. As Laura said, I hope it's the first of many, because I have so many questions.
Yes, I would love to come back and answer all of those.
Good stuff. All right.
Absolutely. Loving your videos and your content as well.
Thank you for the feedback. Thank you. And if there's either you or anyone that you know of have anything in particular that would be productive and beneficial for me to dive into, to put out to the corporate trauma community, please don't hesitate to let me know. I love stories and anecdotes. I keep everybody's identity anonymous, but I will definitely dive headlong into any perspective.
Fantastic. Yeah, we'll pass that on to our listeners too. I echo what Patricia said. Thank you so much, Jamoul, and we'll definitely speak to you soon. So to be continued.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.